brightest places on earth, which is the Kotel Plaza, Temple Mount area, which is right out the window here. And you know, it's interesting that photographers, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard from photographers, you know, they have these light meters to know how to set their settings on their cameras, that every photographer knows around, like the real pros around the world know, that the highest light in the whole entire world is the Kotel Plaza. Now it does make sense, although it's all white stone, you know, and once the sun moves towards the afternoon, it's just like shooting into this like pocket of white stone. And how many places have a white stone wall that is, I don't even know how many feet it is. Does anyone know? 200 feet, maybe 150 feet. It's high. And with a big plaza, so it's like this apex of light. But I like it because it's the temple area. So it's cool that the temple area has the highest amount of light of any other place that you can find. And today we're going to discuss an imbalance in the world, and that imbalance is regarding the small amount of intellectuals in the world, not the small amount of smart people, because you know very smart people have built the phones we're using, and we're not intellectuals. If you're an intellectual, you're not building phones. Very smart people have built the cars that we enjoy and the airplanes that, you know, they were built by geniuses, basically the engineers behind them. And none of them were intellectuals at all. If they were intellectuals, they would have been professors. If they were Jewish, they'd become rabbis. And they would have been involved in ideas, which is what intellectuals love. And these guys don't like ideas, you know, like, I think the most famous engineer today is probably Elon Musk, who's like a total non-intellectual, who's just fascinated by stuff, not fascinated by ideas. And you know, when he, although he's well-read actually, and he's very well-read in the idea world, and maybe it was a fascination when he was a kid, but it didn't last very long. And he's very into how things work. Physical stuff. Anyway, so La Brute, so geniuses have nothing to do necessarily with you know the world of ideas, of intellectual property. You know, they're not that interested in that. So there's three types of people. I call them ones, twos, and threes. The ones are intellectuals. It's about 10% of people. Then there's 45% of people are people. And then there's the third type of person, which is the instinctual people. So they're the three I's. Ones are called intellectuals, twos are called interpersonals, and the threes are called instinctuals. Ones, twos, and threes. And again, there's only 10% of people who just want to stare at their belly button all day and think about what's out there or in there or wherever. And whereas 45% of people really like being around people, and another 45% like to be involved in stuff. And so as you get to know yourself, if you think about your life, you'll realize that you have a certain order that you prefer things. So there's people who are 1, 3, 2s. It means they mostly like ideas, then they like to do things physical, then they like having people around. In other words, they generally don't like having people around. Then you have 3, 1, 2s. They're mostly into physical stuff, then they would like to open a book, but they're a little uncomfortable socially, that's not their favorite. You got people like me, 2, 3, 1s. 2, 3, 1s are into mostly people. And when I'm done with this class, after I pray, probably at the Kotel, I will be going mountain biking, which is very 3, and I'll be by myself as usual. And that's a 3 sport. You know, all sports are 3. No matter what the sport is, it's 3. Just dipping in water, as I did yesterday in the Nahal Prat, which is I was actually in a river, and not just any river, but it's actually called Nahal Prat, and what it does is it goes literally down from the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is a mountain that's part of a shin with the Kidron Valley, I think it's called, and then I don't know what you call the Silwan Valley entrance, I forgot the name of it, and then the third is called the Gehenna Valley, and it's actually a shin, and that whole shin meets up, it like goes down into what's called the what we call today Wadi Kelt. I don't know what the biblical name of it is, and it is just one of the more beautiful places on earth. It's one of the only west-east or east-west, however you want to say it, valleys, because the whole country has these east-west valleys, and every couple of kilometers there's another slot canyon, like a deep Grand Canyon type slot canyon. Every couple miles, all the way down to Eilat. Like these things just keep going all the way down into the south. But they're all dry till there's a flash flood. And in the winter, they can just like, with big rains in the mountains anywhere from, Tiberias all the way down to south of Hebron. All it takes is big rains and those slot canyons just become rushing rivers. One of the only ones that always has water because it's spring-based, meaning the water that comes down it is because of springs, is called Wadi Kelt. And that's this river. Now this river comes from the Shin, from the Triple Canyons, starts right outside the Dung Gate here at Sharshbot, and then it becomes the most beautiful, deepest slot canyon. It's a slot canyon if you're walking in the river, so it's like walls coming up, but then it's like giant mountains on either side, and it actually ends in Jericho, in the city of Jericho, which is what I was overlooking yesterday while I had lunch. And Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Nice. So anyway, you could actually, when the right winds and when the Levites, which could have been thousands of singers and thousands of musicians, would be doing their thing, they could hear it in Jericho. So it's really something special to be in that canyon because it's got a vibration and you feel the wind coming down the canyon as you're just in this delicious, fresh spring water. You can drink the water you swim in, which is amazing. I don't suggest drinking it unless you're at one of the spots, and I know the secret spots, where the water's literally coming out of the rock into the river. So I've just taken bottles. I've run out of water down there. It's hot, in summer. You're in the shade though because you're in a slot canyon, unless the sun's directly overhead. But there's even overhangs. Like yesterday, we were there midday, so we were just chilling under overhangs. But you can literally take your water. You're in a river. You take your water next to a rock where you feel it's freezing, and you just put your bottle up to the freezing part in the river, and your bottle just fills up with spring water, and then you're set. But when the water warms up a bit, now you're in regular river water. So who knows what animals are upstream going to the bathroom? So you might want to avoid that. Why I'm mentioning this to you is because and the fact that I was so fascinated to even discuss it is because the three of me that felt that freezing water, and I had a little island in the river of pebbles. I did yoga in that little island there with my wife. We did yoga there while my daughters were just cracking up and having a great time in the river. And there's also a water slide there. There's a spot, if you have the courage, to just go down a waterfall, and it turns, natural rock turn straight into a deep pool filled with fish. There's fish everywhere in this river. They're chomping on your calluses on your feet. So. And I'm gonna stop describing this. But don't get me started, because I'll just tell you all about mountain biking, or I'll tell you all about going to sauna, or whatever, because I'm a 2-3-1. And the fact that most people who like these places never talk about it, because they're usually threes who like these places, and they wouldn't feel the need to share. Why would I need to share it? Whereas I'm not only love these places, but I can't wait to talk about them. And with people, because I love people. Inner person. And then there's ones. And because I'm a 2-3-1, so you'll find generally the number you're the least is your challenge. So my challenge is opening up a book without falling asleep. And when I open up a book, I can read a few lines and then I just like that. And it doesn't matter how fascinating the topic, the fact that it's not three-dimensional in my face, either human or some other sensory, because I'm a 3, I'm sensory. So if it's not in my face, if it's not people in my face, and it's not sensory, which is in my face, I just literally, like, every lack of sleep I have in the world just goes, and I shut up. So the question is, how did a guy who's a 2-3-1 become a rabbi? And the answer is, I found a couple tricks. I figured out very early on, because if I was going to study any Torah, I needed to find tricks. And I found very early on some tricks. And I had 2 major tricks, and I spent hours and hours and hours and hours a day studying, like 12, 13, 14 hours a day studying, using these 2 tricks. One was never sit. Now, I can sleep standing, I discovered very quickly. For long periods of time, I can sleep standing, and I figured out another amazing trick. Not too many people know this, but if you have an ice cube in your mouth, you can't fall asleep. And so every morning I would come into the study hall, I would go down to this ice machine in the basement, and I would take a big, like, container cup, like one of those, like, liter size ones, and dig in the ice and put the ice there. I would stand, I would use what's called a stender, because you stand while you're using it, a stender. And I'd put the stender on a chair so it'd be nice and tall. Why? Because I'm a yoga man, I'm a 3. And yoga man don't put his head down like that. Okay? Yoga man keep the head straight. And because I want to have alignment, and I don't want to be, I'm 5'10". Yeah, I don't want to be 5'4". Just because of a lack of spinal alignment. And I'll never forget when my kids started yeshiva, where all the kids are like, kind of like, they look like they use smartphones, but they just use books, growing up in our intense study halls. So when my kid was starting his first year in Torah study, he was, about 5 years old, where he was really going to be hitting the books. So we got him a stender, so he would have proper spinal alignment. He came home very embarrassed with his stender. He brought it home, and we're like, "What happened with the stender?" And he's like, "My Rebbe taught the whole class a lesson because of my stender, and that is that you bring yourself to the Torah. You do not bring the Torah to you. Please don't do me any more favors." The kid said, "Please don't do me any more favors." Thanks for humiliating me in front of my class and becoming the teaching point of the day. Anyway, but that's just another example, a classic example. First of all, it's a very sweet teaching about life. To bring yourself to Torah, not Torah to you. It's a sweet teaching. But it's also a classic dysfunction philosophy. I call them dysfunction philosophies, where you create a philosophy around dysfunction. And so that's a dysfunction philosophy. And on that subject, you should know that every single one of us has dysfunctional philosophies that we've built around usually trauma. Usually our dysfunctional philosophy are built around trauma. For example, if you ever touch someone and they jump back, and then you're like, whoa, obviously there's some trauma with that person. And I have a good feeling that it had something to do with touch. But then the person says to me, I'm the kind of person right? You know when someone says, I'm the kind of person that, you're getting to their philosophy now. I'm the kind of person who like really needs to know someone before he's touched. You understand? Like they'll build some philosophy around it. This is why, if you guys would like to really grow, I'll give you a great ticket to grow. And one of you had mentioned growth. I don't remember, but I think it'll really help you grow. Is catch yourself when you're saying your philosophy. Catch yourself. People build philosophy around their dysfunction. So catch yourself when you're giving it over. If you got a lot of rules, that's your philosophy. You understand? If you have a lot of rules around you, that's your stuff. And it's surrounding some kind of dysfunction. Well, think about it. If you create a philosophy around a dysfunction, you'll never get out of it. You understand? That's why the ticket, one of the great tickets to growth, is to catch yourself with your rules, with your little stories around the stuff that you've, meaning the reasons you've added to life of why things have to be the way they have to be. And when you do that, you become also very humble, because who the hell am I? Like I've ordered burgers like my father my whole life, medium well. Because that's how it should be cooked. It should be really cooked. Nothing raw on that thing. And anyway, I was made fun of a few times. Just going like, what they do to your burger. You're missing all the flavor. It's like you're eating like charcoal. And anyway, I was made fun of a few times. But eventually, they didn't cook my burger right, so I took a bite of it, and I saw that it was actually more on the medium rare side. And my immediate story of my father, which I'm going really part of right now, I'm just saying, because this is it. We also have stories we carry from our parents and our grandparents, things we were told that just don't make any sense sometimes. And I think, by the way, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, but the whole Jews eating their meat well cooked was a fear of eating blood, because it's forbidden to eat blood. And when you cook meat on a grill, you actually don't. All kosher meat has to be salted unless it's on a grill, because the fire will pull out all the blood. So I think it was the fact that for probably millennia, Jews who didn't have access to regular cooking stuff would just cook the meat on fire. And cooking the meat on fire means, or maybe they didn't have access to salt, I don't know. They just couldn't, they were gonna use the fire to get rid of the blood. And that might be where this tradition, Jewish society of having well cooked meat. By the way, no one's into that anymore. All the young Hasidim like their meat, according to their taste, not according to how bad you can burn it. Anyway, but here I was with this rare burger. Now, my father has another thing, that anytime his meat's a little rare, he sends it back and he says the following words: put a little more fire on it. And the waiter's supposed to understand what that means. And he takes the meat and he barbecues it some more. But I had that rare burger and I just said, I'm eating it. I don't know if I'm gonna get worms or what's gonna happen to me, am I gonna die? But I'd rather die than live my life in some kind of crazy dysfunction with philosophies around it. So, because that itself is death, if you think about it. I don't mean physical death. But don't we all kind of die when we're no longer dynamic? I understand why animals, fish really need water. They're not very dynamic, but they got needs that you have to have. But human beings, other than love, love's a non-negotiable kind of love. But other than that, just go with it. We're great. I mean, we're unbelievably resilient, and we can be in any situation. But if you've become someone who can't be in any situation, it's because you've metastasized. You're stagnant. You're you're stagnating because you've got too many philosophies built around your dysfunction. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
I could also be that your philosophies are disguised in Torah and mitzvos and, but exaggerated.
Yeah, that's also the case.
How do you know when your philosophies are masking something good as opposed to something bad?
Masking something good. Well, I don't know. Let me start with his question, but I don't know if I would answer that necessarily because I'm not sure what it means to mask something good. You'd have to give me an example, but first let me answer that. If you have a good example, then you'll tell me. Certainly someone can be masking dysfunction with Torah. For example, the Haredi community, the Black Attitude world, is rather stoic when it comes to intimacy. And, they're pretty stoic. It's a lot of post-war type of, having been tortured. And listen, once you're disassociated by torture, and what is the first thing we check when we find a victim of abuse or rape or anything? The first thing you check is, are they there? Maybe they checked out. And the answer is, of course they checked out. You can't go through some abuse like that without checking out. But how badly are they checked out? Meaning, does this person need to go to a mental ward first, just to come back to themselves? Not that mental wards are very helpful. But that's called disassociation. It is what happens when you have a dentist coming at you with a needle straight to your gums. Here we are constantly protecting our gums from anything painful. Even a bad hit with the toothbrush can be, quite a wipeout, to use a surfing term. And did I mention the professional tour is starting Thursday in Fiji, or is that unnecessary right now? Okay, let's go back. So the disassociation means that I lost my eye, maybe for a second with the needle, maybe for a few weeks with an abuse situation or some other trauma, and maybe forever with the Holocaust. Well, once I don't have an eye, so if there's no eye, there's no I love you. I mean, I may love you, but I don't have enough eye to express it. Because it'd be pretty scary. Expressing love is one of the most vulnerable things you do, so your eye has to be pretty good to do it. You get that? Expressing love is one of the scariest, most vulnerable things you ever do. So you really have to work on your eye to have love in your life. And anyway, so the observant community, if you're in a full community of stoic people who don't have a lot of touch, who don't have a lot of words of love, and many of whom are stretched to the gills with kids. So let's just say, for an example, let's just say, anyone here was raised observant? Okay, you guys, how many kids in your house? How many kids in your house?
3.
12.
12, okay, we'll go with you. 12 kids. So let's just say we would give your mother on a scale of 1 to 10 of how good she was. Loving you was a 10, but how good she was at loving you, like specifically, perfectly, like just right in the zone of like a 10. She ain't getting a 10 because
It's still very high.
I'm glad it was still very high, but I mean, how many mothers are at 10? Would my kids rate my wife at 10? Would they rate me at 10? The actual loving. Like, what would you rate it? So now, let's just say, so you said it was pretty high, so high is nice. So you give it a 6, 7, 8, 9,
8.
8, excellent. Now divide the 8 up into 10 kids. She's not even at a 1 at this point. Because you need actual, not just quality, you need quantity when you're a little guy. How much does a kid need of his mother's love? On a scale of 1 to 100%, how much does a kid actually need?
110.
Right, they need 100% of the love. 100%. So here you are, this young guy, who needs 100% of the love, and he's at best going to get it divided between all the 10. And he's also, she's also got other things going on. You know, her raising kids wasn't the only thing she was doing, although it was probably most of what she was doing. But she's doing other things too. And then you got all the mothers who, like, you know, you're a Sephardi, so she's not a Holocaust survivor.
She's half Ashkenaz.
Oh, say no more. Anyway, but I can tell you that the people growing up in the post-Holocaust communities are like, I've never heard, maybe in my entire life, of all the women I polled, and I polled a lot of women, never did I hear an 8. Ever. That would have been a dream. They probably wouldn't have even been in my program had their mothers given them an 8. Unless, of course, their fathers were giving them 2. Okay. Anyway, I'm going back to topic. Just before I do, I just want to close it with the thought or the reality that being dynamic as a human being, being really alive, means being a human becoming, like we're constantly flowing. So what is the words? If God sends this, then eat this. If God sends peanuts, eat peanut butter. What is it?
If life gives you lemons,
Make lemonade. Yeah, life gives you lemons. Make lemonades. If the burger's served, was served rare, enjoy your first rare burger. And to close it with my great teacher, Rav Shalom Shachna Friedman, he 2 things from him. One is that on Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, you should eat something that you normally don't like. Ever heard that? Eat something you normally don't like. And so let's say you don't like tomatoes. So make sure you eat a tomato on Rosh Hashanah Day. And the reason why is because to say you don't like tomatoes would be pulling last year's tomato aversion into this year. Who says you don't like tomatoes? You gotta take a bite of a tomato. And if you still don't like tomatoes, spit it out. But don't come into the new year with last year's tomato aversion. And then to take it really extreme, we were once learning with him, our normal Thursday night, all night learning. And we get to this point where maybe the most mind-blowing thing in the last year was studied. Like, we got to the most mind-blowing thing perhaps in the last year, and we get to it and we're just like, the whole room was like the emoji with half the heads coming up. The whole room was like, even the Rebbe, and the Rebbe does not react a lot, speaking of Stoic. We were blown away, all of us. The Rebbe was blown away. After about a minute of silence, with every person just looking at each other, just going, wow. And this itself, by the way, should blow you all away, because every person in that room was a Torah scholar who had anywhere from a decade to decades of intensive, constant input of Torah. And that you can get blown away by the Torah as if, like getting your mind blown in such an epiphanous moment inside a book written hundreds or thousands of years ago. Anyway, so listen to what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said something very deep. When he finally came back to himself, he spoke and said, you know what the difference between you guys and me is? He said, you guys are going to fit, you're going to fit this thought, this idea we just read, you're going to fit that idea into everything you've ever learned, which we thought would have been a compliment. You know what he said? I'm going to take everything I've ever learned and fit it into this thought. Meaning, I'm going to recalibrate every piece of Torah I've ever seen and into that thought. That's going to be the new overhead transparency that everything shines through from now on. Yeah.
You expect a younger person to have it easier recalibrating everything they've ever learned, as opposed to the elder Rebbe.
The young person?
The younger students, who the Rebbe said, you're going to take everything you've ever learned and calibrate it into.
Or the opposite. You're going to put this into everything you ever learned.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to answer that question. Sorry.
No, it's
We're
fine.
0 for 2 on me knowing how to answer your questions.
Sorry.
But I like the way you think, though.
Thank you.
I just don't know how to answer your questions.
No, it's fine.
Okay, so now, the Jewish society, at least the Torah society, in the last 200 years, created a new system called yeshiva. 200 years ago, they created these first yeshivas. Now, you might say, well, yeshivas aren't 200 years old. Yeshivas go all the way back to the Babylonians. There were yeshivas there. Yes, there were yeshivas where great Torah scholars would gather together and pore over the laws of, the Torah. They were great Torah scholars. There's not a person probably any of us would have met, including the greats of our generation, that would have been let in there. meaning it could even be that the greats of our generation in 2024 would not have been admitted into the study hall. Because to be admitted into such a study hall, because there's limited seats, and the way to get in would have been because you were beyond, any fathomable, what we would fathom as scholarship. You were beyond that, and you were therefore in there. I'm not going to go and explain all that right now, of what kind of knowledge and wisdom the elders had throughout history. And if I were to describe it, I would be crying. And the reason why I cry when I discuss it is because we're very, very, very far away. And for the eyes to have beheld, or the ears to have beheld, or the heart to have beheld what was considered normal in those days of the Jewish people, to have people in your midst like this, and I'm using the word people like maybe loosely here, because these were like angels, these people. And by the way, they all worked. They were only angels when it came to Torah. They were working guys. They were real characters, and quite crass in their interactions with each other. There was no pomp and circumstance, no powdered wigs, no intellectual university ivory towers. I mean, these people were like super real, and anyway, but we miss them very much, and we're missing that, and it could be the confusion of the world is just because there's no one pointing north like they were pointing at the times. And they were part of the reason why anyone who lived 2,000 years ago, which was right around the end of that era, and that anyone who lived in those eras didn't have any doubt that there was God, that Torah was true. Like, all the modern atheism had to come with, the Industrial Revolution, the Enlightenment. All of a sudden, there wasn't these human beings walking around. What was the discussion between Plato and I just saw it the other day. Between Plato and I forget who was Plato speaking to as one of the greats of a generation.
Aristotle?
What?
Aristotle?
It was Plato was talking.
Socrates.
No, I'm sorry. He was speaking to one of the great Jewish sages. Yeah, I forget. It was like the biggest of all the sages. Anyway, he was talking to him, and the sage was crying over the destruction of the temple, and Plato came up to him, and he's like a man of your stature, like crying over wood and stones. And Plato had a list of philosophical inquiries that he could never solve. And the rabbi said, please tell me your inquiries. And the rabbi Plato told him like 10 kind of impossible paradoxes that just he was always stuck on. He never got to to understand them. In other words, he didn't have the ability to further distinguish the complexities such that they would decouple and understand them separately. What's a paradox? Paradox is when two things are conflicting yet seem true, but it's a problem because they're conflicting. And so he had like 10 paradoxes that really bothered him, that he could not distinguish. Anyway, so the rabbi, maybe if someone's looking it up for me, but the rabbi, you found it?
No, I'm looking.
The rabbi solved all 10 paradoxes in 10 sentences. And then he looked at Plato and he says, now you know why I'm crying over the wooden stones. And he says, why? He says, because the wisdom, all the wisdom that I've ever achieved in my life, and that solved your paradoxes as well, came from that wooden stone. Meaning it came because of the temple, which is a very deep thought, that the temple's existence was the ability of wisdom to pour into the world. Wisdom poured into the world, and when the temple was destroyed, wisdom stopped pouring into the way it did in those days. 200 years ago, the Enlightenment hit, and one of the answers to the Enlightenment was, well, the big answer to Enlightenment is something called the Haredi movement. So if you're a Gentile watching this, the word Haredi, which I guess you could spell Chareidi, Haredi, it means to shake before God, like quivering before God. It's actually considered a very high level thing to achieve, is to be a Haredi. I'm not discussing the movement, I'm discussing actual, like serving God is like, you know you got clarity if you're shaking. If you're shaking, you got clarity on who God is. But it became a movement, and the movement was to protect whatever's left of Judaism for the future. And it's a dynamic situation. The Haredi situation is a dynamic situation. What do I mean by dynamic? In as much as the Enlightenment movement took off Judaism or traditionalism, conservatism, to conserve the past, in as much as the Enlightenment, which was like throw off the yoke of Europe and the church and everything they ever went through, and freedom of expression and individuality, whatever they took off, and they took it off slowly, the Haredim put on. So whatever they took off, the Haredim put on. So, for example, the first president to ever not wear a hat in public was John F. Kennedy, who was a liberal. It was the 1960s, and I forget who he took over for. Nixon or Eisenhower, and he was the first ever to take off his hat. But I promise you that the Haredim that year, they already wore black hats at that point, but maybe not everyone did, but as soon as he took off his hat, he gave permission to all the men in America to stop wearing hats to work. The president doesn't wear a hat. So why do you have to wear a hat? And I know this sounds funny, but every single man wore a hat. You didn't have a hat, you weren't a man. And Goyim wore hats. Jews wore hats. But a real fedora, like a real hat, and anything less was a man who lacks self-respect. Anything less, could be plenty of those men lack self-respect with the hat. But it would be admitting it to go without a hat. And you're just a weirdo and a stranger and someone who's would be scrutinized for showing up without his hat. Anyway, Kennedy took his hat and went, and we don't need hats anymore. And what we're dealing with today is just the result of years and years of post Kennedy's taking off his hat. You know, now they're just taking off everything at this point. And it's always funny to me because I live in a very observant community, and when I go out, especially now that the country's on vacation, so like last night I was at an art fair, and I don't think any other observant Jews thought that'd be a good idea to go to an art fair. I don't know why, but somehow all my, kippah wearing compatriots were gone, and I was in a full secular Israeli scene. But what was happening simultaneously at the bottom of this art fair was a giant rock concert. And I think it was 85% girls, just from the volume of the singing. It was louder than the band. I mean, this was a full-on outdoor amphitheater with 30,000 people. You can imagine what the sound system was like. The singing was loud. The singing of the crowd was loud. Anyway, but I had to definitely keep my eyes down the whole time of just getting around there, because there was no sense, there was absolutely zero sense of, what would be the word? Shame, maybe. Yeah, shame. Like, if I were to be seen nude, I would be ashamed. That's the feeling, I think. Now, if I were seen nude 10 times in a row, maybe I wouldn't be ashamed. Okay, I can't help but tell a story. I was teaching a class at Asia Torah, and one day I walk into my class, my regular class, and what had happened is they brought in another group that was, it was like a big group, like 50 kids or something. They had offered them to, break out into different classes. Anyway, what happened was they were on their way to the Dead Sea after the class. So some of these girls, they don't know Judaism, they've never been to the old city. They're like, why don't we wear our bathing suits already if we're going to the sea afterwards? Like, why get dressed? So we'll just wear our bathing suits to the class. And because it was a class, lunch, Dead Sea. Great, we'll put on our bathing suits and leave. They had their flip-flops on. And anyway, I come into my class, and there's 3 women in bathing suits in the class. And here we are, we're overlooking the Temple Mount in this situation. I'm just like, oh my gosh. There was, they were so uncomfortable, they looked like they wanted to fall through the earth when I walked in that room.
They were uncomfortable?
Very, meaning even though obviously these girls were way beyond shame. Shame can get awoken when in the presence of people, just like me in the presence of my Rebbe. I am in a constant state of shame. When I'm with him, I'm scared to death the whole time. I'm feeling very exposed. And I know he loves me and has no judgment whatsoever. He's crazy about me. But I'm scared to death and full of shame. I'm with him. Anyway, they look like I'm gonna fall through the floor, which meant I can't even start the class without making a funny comment. I gotta say something. So I forget what I said. I don't know what I said. It doesn't matter what I said. It was something like, what lovely bathing suits you girls are wearing today, or whatever. I don't remember what I said. But it was really funny, and it was funnier than that. And the class, they busted up, the class busted up. Except guess what? Of the 3 girls, one of them started crying and ran out. Okay. Guess something's a little different with her, but anyway, but then the class was great. They had a great time. Even those girls had a great time. And at the end of the class, I go down to our lunch in the yeshiva, and I get a tap on the shoulder. Can I come down to speak to the management? I've offended somebody. So I go down to the management, and I said, yeah, we have this group here, and we don't know what you said, but you've offended someone in their group, and we are expecting you to go to the dining hall where they're in across the old city and apologize. So I'm like, no problem. So I go to the dining hall, and I realize that word has gotten out for sure. Like, this girl's probably made a stink about, her being offended by a rabbi. So I decided I'm not going to apologize to her. My apology has to be to everyone. Because if I've offended her, I've offended their group. And so I get everyone's attention, and I said, listen, everybody, I just want to apologize for having embarrassed this girl who was in my class. And there was absolutely no intention to have offended her in any way, and I'm sorry. And I start walking out of the building, at which point the girl, who was already covered up, said, I guess she borrowed a scarf, or I don't know what she had, but she had stuff around her, and she says, can we speak, please? And I said, sure. So we went to a room right next to the entrance there, and she bursts out crying, and she says, I don't know what I'm doing with these people, but I was raised totally observant, and I'm with this group of people who no one here even knows the Hebrew alphabet. And, she was raised like in Brooklyn. And she said that when my roommate said, hey, let's go in our bathing suits, I was scared to death. When you walked in the room, then I was ready to die. And then when you made your joke, I died. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I thought I could be like them. I thought I could just leave it all behind. Like, what's going on with me? She was great. She was amazing. And I said to her, listen, you go out one day like this, at the beach even, in a mixed beach, men's beach, like it would be hard for you. But to do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you'd probably eventually be okay with it. But are you sure you want to let go of it? Are you sure you want to let go of that sense of modesty inside? Are you sure you want to just give it out? And don't forget that anyone you attract, any man you attract, is highly, highly suspicious of having been attracted to your body parts, which is not the kind of guy you want raising your children. So you may want to think twice. So they went down to the Dead Sea, and I don't actually know what happened to her that day, but I did get word, and it was from her. A year later, she came up to me after, I think, a Shavuos class or whenever. She came up to me and said that, I don't remember if she said she went to the Dead Sea or didn't go to the Dead Sea, but she was done. The trip ended for her right there. She left the group and went to learn Torah in a regular girls' school. And fully observant. So that was the offending someone day. And I want to mention to you guys, since we're on the topic of offending people, don't make it a hard rule never to offend people. Don't make that a hard rule. And when I say offend, I don't just mean offend. Don't make it a hard rule not to rock the boat. Some of the most beautiful, observant families I know are my siblings. And I rock their boats so wildly that, you could only fall out of it from it was like a canoe, and when I became observant, so immediately, who do I love the most? Because whoever I love the most is the most important to me. That they don't have to become observant, but to at least make a choice. And the only way to make a choice is an informed choice, which means you need information. And so I could not live with myself if the people I loved most were not at least exposed to Torah, to Judaism. So I basically swam up to their canoe and I just went, and they realized they're not going to be able to get away with this. They're going to have to do it, or they're never going to hear the end of it. By the way, the second they acquiesced, the second they, that I made them enough uncomfortable, they went and exposed themselves to Torah. But the second they exposed themselves to Torah, I immediately, now it's your life, You expose yourself to Torah, well, you have to make some choices. And I got totally away from those choices. So one of my brothers is a great Jewish leader who's modern Orthodox, but like, really modern Orthodox. More modern than Orthodox. Okay, but he's observant, fully observant, and he's a great teacher. It's like, you ever been to a bar mitzvah where there was more bar than mitzvah? So maybe more modern than Orthodox, but there's nothing he can do though. He's a 3-2-1, a 3-1-2. Sorry, and he's just a total party animal. He's a 3-1-2, and his people skills are very good though for a 3-1-2. He's crazy about people, but he's a musician. He's a musician, athlete. His whole life's just music. But he certainly loves ordering a beer and schmoozing with everybody at the concerts he goes to every night. He actually got smicha this year. That's because he's 3-1-2. Believe me, no 3-2-1's getting smicha. And I'm a fluke. I didn't want to get smicha. Smicha, if you don't know that word, it means to become ordained as a rabbi. There's very few twos that have smicha. But it's a good thing for twos to get smicha because they're the best at interacting with human beings. Listen, I know other people who now are observant for 30 years. 30 years. And their becoming observant has become a permanent point of contention in their immediate family for the last 30 years. And I can tell you there's only one reason why it's been a point of contention for 30 years. Because they didn't rock the boat. Because there was some unwritten rule, speaking of rules, some unwritten rule that you don't mess with people. And so he didn't mess with his family, or she didn't mess with her family. It's live and let live. Don't rock the boat. Leave people alone. And it never goes away. It never goes away. Shmuel, can you find whoever's causing this sound to happen? To have it stop? Thank you. Sorry. Good luck finding it. Oh, it might be right outside the door.
Probably.
But maybe press the buttons to get the door to latch. I don't know. Anyway.
Right from the office.
I don't think so. It might be like the bookstores. It's funny, these little kids sing in Jewish music. If you were raised in rock and roll, that's just not, No offense to anyone raised observant, like having songs being led by a squeaky little kid who has no understanding of singing dynamics,
I think it's because you can't have girls, you need like a high pitch.
Yeah, that also.
Isn't that how they used to do Shakespeare? Never.
Little kids, I don't know.
No, they had like boys playing women
Did they?
in the Shakespearean ensembles.
Interesting. Yeah, it could be like that. So you gotta learn there's a fine line between manipulation and agitation. Hey, I got words today. But there's a fine line, you were my word guy. There's a fine line between manipulation and agitation. You should definitely make people uncomfortable if it will lead to their growth. Agitate them. But do not manipulate people. They will, in the end, they'll do another 180 if you manipulate them, and they'll have a lot of resentment as a result of manipulation. So. Part of the Haredi movement was to create yeshivas. Wow. Do not disturb. Part of the Shmuel, not bad, man. You went all the way. You actually told the store to turn down the music.
The store.
It was a bookstore.
And then I did it.
You did it yourself.
And they didn't know how to do the,
You didn't know how to do it, so you did it.
Okay, it's cute.
the nice
Yeah.
yeah.
that event last night, I was schmoozing with my wife, and we had an important talk, but there was a stand with 2 speakers blasting like dance music. Turn them off. There were another 300, but at least we don't need the ones that were in our faces. So, yeah, so they created yeshivas. And yeshivas are where people sit and learn. We didn't even handle this yesterday. Oh my gosh. The root, when you want something, when you're motivated to do something, you run. How do you know someone's motivated? They're running, right? If you see someone running down the street, you know they want something serious. That's, the root is ratz, means to want, rotzeh. The root for wanting is rotzeh, is ratzon. And it's a 2-letter word, resh tzadik, means to run. What's the opposite of running?
Staying stagnant.
Well, standing would be the opposite, but there's even more opposite. Because if you're standing, you might be about to walk, you might be about to run, you might be about to sit, I don't know. But once you're sitting, you ain't going nowhere. Once you're sitting, you're not going anywhere. And you're sitting. And once you're sitting, you're contemplating. Now that's the position of thought. Well, what's good about that? I'll tell you what's good about it. What's good about it is when you sit and contemplate. Well, one of the things you might contemplate is what you want. And if you contemplate what you want, if you finally get up and start running towards it, you at least can really run with determination and motivation because you've clarified what you want. Clarifying what you want by sitting is the ultimate. Society has everyone running around kind of like chickens with their heads cut off, looking for what they want. But how many rocks are you going to overturn to try to find what you want? Wouldn't it be better just to sit and think about, like, what do I want? Wouldn't that be the better way to do it? Meaning, rather than shooting 100 arrows at 100 trees, wouldn't it be better to shoot 1 arrow at 1 tree? Careful, let's shoot 2. Wouldn't it be better to shoot 1 arrow at 1 tree? Which is the famous story, which everyone's heard a lot probably here, but you know the famous story, the archer, the greatest archer ever? Oh, great. Someone doesn't know that story? Yeah, can't stop touching steel. The story of the greatest archer, is that there was a king walking through the forest, and there was troops he was with his troops, they were training in shooting arrows and archery. And they kept coming upon trees that had targets on it with the arrow, like literally millimeter in the bullseye, like right there in the bullseye. And so they keep finding more of these, and the king finally says, there is some archer that's the greatest archer in the world. Please find him. So the soldiers come to the forest, they found the archer, they brought him to the king, and the king says, tell me, what's your secret? How do you get a bullseye every single time? And so the archer said, it's very simple. I pull back my arrow, I shoot it into the tree, and then I take my paintbrush and I paint a target around the arrow. This is how most people are living their lives. Try this, try that, try this, try that, and eventually like something kind of works. Especially if you have a big fear of failure, you're like just going to avoid anything that didn't work the first time. But eventually something kind of works, kind of. And then you start spinning circles around it, putting a target and saying, well, this is what I always wanted. It's like Western dating. What is Western dating if not shooting arrows into it? Just shoot your arrows until someone finally tells the poor fool that she loves him. You know, how many men and women in horrible relationships have I spoken to where when, by the end of the hour, what really happened was someone finally said, I love you. And they were like, oh, okay, so I guess let's paint the target. Because this person who's absolutely horrible for me said, I love you. Meaning that's how far down self-esteem can go, that someone would marry someone because And that person loved them, even though it was really bad match. Yeshiva is a place where you get clarity to figure out what you want in life. It's where you get all the information, and then you dial it in, and then you pull your arrows and you start shooting. And again, I'd rather you shoot one arrow where you want it to go than 100 arrows trying to figure out where you want your arrows in your life. But just to end this thing, is the subject is that the yeshiva community is very intellectual. It's a community based on the study of ideas in books, and that's a very not nice way to call Torah. But in the end, if you were a scientist watching a video from a surveillance camera in the corner of the room, what do you see? Human beings, books open, discussing ideas. That's intellectual. Well, about 10% of society, 1/10 of society is intellectual. And they created 200 years ago, as a result of the Enlightenment, yeshivas to protect the community, to protect the gift of Torah. And it's a big gift, and to lose Torah would have been a big deal. But what was the price? What was the price of yeshivas? The price of yeshivas was that Judaism was no longer going to be for everybody. Now, is the yeshiva Judaism? No. Judaism's always for everybody. But for the first time, they're going to rebrand Judaism as this actual study of the Torah, period. That is Judaism. It's the study of Torah. I've even messed with people. I've walked up to yeshiva boys and said, tell me, what's the most important thing in the world? They said, Torah. So can you think of something else that might be close to it? Nothing. Inka Torah. I said, so, come on, there's got to be something more important than Torah. They're like, it's blasphemy. Nothing's more important than Torah. Anyway, at which point I finally let them know the answer, that God is more important than Torah. I mean, God gave the Torah and wants us keeping the Torah, so it's certainly important. Let me share with you another interesting one. If I had a whiteboard, it'd be cool. I think I do. Hold, is it in there? Is there a pen in the tray? I had a room of 43s. I had a room of 43s in Lakewood. I ever tell you about this? 43s in Lakewood. These guys were like, you know, is there a pen there? Is there a pen in the tray?
43 personalities?
No, 40
Personalities.
40
people.
40 people
Number threes.
who were all number 3s. And
Like me and you.
am I in the frame? 40 people, all with a personality of 3s. And I put on the board for them, I put a Venn diagram. We had one circle like that, and another circle like that. And in the Venn diagrams where you blur things that should not be blurred, right? You wouldn't want your eye doctor to blur the parts of your eye in a surgery, right? You want them properly distinguished. You don't want them blurred. You don't want your mechanic blurring parts of your engine, okay? Right? You want your mechanic to know the difference between the things in there. And you don't have to know, but they do. You want them distinguished. We're over here, we just call it car. You get in there and drive, you know? And we just see with our eyes. We don't need to know what parts of the eyes are separate from each other. Now, I wrote, on this side, I wrote, the number 612. And in the other circle, I put the number 1. And I asked these 3s, these instinctual guys, I asked them, tell me what's your What did I put on the board? And they knew that it equals 613. They were not able to figure out much more than that because they're threes. And threes, as smart as they are thinking in terms of ideas. And what I said to them was, well, what do you think the one is? Obviously, if it's the 613 mitzvahs, which mitzvah is that one? That didn't go very well either. And then I said to him, it's the most important mitzvah, which didn't help much either. And then I finally said, because they thought it was maybe Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, or something. The first of the 10 commandments. No, it's not the first of the 10 commandments. It is the Torah commandment. One of the 613 is the study of Torah.
Correct.
It's the study
You said
of
that
Torah.
answer.
And you can't really keep Torah if you didn't study it, because you're not going to know what you're doing. So it is very important. It's considered like all the other commandments because you can't really keep them if you don't study the Torah to know how to keep them. Anyway, but what happened was that 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago now, during the Enlightenment period, in order to keep Judaism going, they made yeshivas. This is where people study in yeshiva. And all these commandments become suddenly, marginalized, I guess, in some way. And this one commandment of studying the Torah, because they made Torah study so big, everyone started blurring Judaism, because this is Judaism. Judaism became yeshiva. Judaism became the study of Torah. Judaism became the study of the Torah. And so if you weren't good at studying Torah because you're a 3 and you're not that happy with all these guys in the room, and you're not that happy about staring at books all day because you're a 3. If that's your situation, and that fails, what else failed? Judaism failed. And so you're out. But here's the amazing thing. Here's the most cool thing is, what are those 612 commandments? What are they all about?
Were you asking us?
They're all for the 3s. The 612 commandments are about the 3s. Do you know there's 2 commandments regarding Torah? One is to study it, and there's another one that's totally for 3s. You know what it is?
To inform me?
No.
Teaching?
No. It's to honor those who do. I.e. 3s, Mr. Range Rover with the construction sites and the buildings he's building and send some money towards the guy studying the Torah, which of course these days those guys don't want to send a penny to them. The Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, calls, they're sitting in their meeting, okay, who's got money from our students over the last 4 decades? And oh, this guy made it big, Mr. Range Rover, call him. And the Rosh Yeshiva, Yaakov Yosef's like, who calls me that anymore? He's like, it's Jack. And he's like, Jack, okay, Jack. Jack, it's your Rosh Yeshiva from 30 years ago. I've heard you've done very well, and maybe you'd like to give. And Jack's like, Rabbi, it's a miracle that I still keep Shabbat after what happened to me in your yeshiva. Click. And meanwhile, this guy had major trauma that happened to him there. He wound up off the path of Judaism for 5 years straight. Completely lost himself into the impurities that a man could easily fall into for those 5 years. And but miraculously, the right things happened, the right times, and someone brought them back. You understand? So, meaning we're killing our own donors. We're killing our own donors because threes are the guys who pay for yeshivas. Who pays for yeshiva? Threes. Twos are too busy socializing. The threes are the ones who should be paying for the yeshiva, but we gotta respect them and honor them and have separate programs in every yeshiva for the threes. But think, what are the 612? It's like strapping leather straps around it. Like, threes love leather. Yeah, if we're up to threes, they'd be wearing leather pants. You know, they're sensory, like they want leather. You know, they got strapping leather. Okay, I like that. You know, building sukkahs. Threes like that. You know, do you know how many laws there are around in the Torah? You know how many laws there are around sexuality? Oh, let's just say a lot. You know, and by the way, threes should be only studying those laws. If you do have a three in your yeshiva, well, for heaven's sakes, he should never leave Seder Nashim his entire yeshiva career. He should always be in study of females, meaning of sexual unions. Forbidden or not forbidden, let him study this stuff. But the opposite, they want to turn these yeshiva boys into eunuchs. They give them the most complex subjects. I'm talking only about the threes right now. They're giving these threes the most complex subjects about things that would never ever happen. They get so hypothetical in some of these discussions. Splitting hairs in the distinctions. Splitting the hairs of distinctions on the subject. The three's ready to just throw himself off the edge of the building just because he can't take it anymore. You know, and none of this means anything to him. It has zero application. A three only said, and any of you guys who are threes here, if you've given up on Talmud study, go right back to it and study in depth the tractates of the Talmud that are around anything having to do with sexuality, and there's lots of them. And anyway, but back to this, is that the 612 commandments are... No. Attend to YouTube. I got it. I told you. So these 612 commandments are all for the threes. The only commandment that's for... Okay, there's a few more maybe. But I think I could even argue that the only commandment that's for ones is Torah study. I think it might be the only one. I was thinking maybe the commandment to cleave to God, but that would only work with Chabad's version of cleaving to God, which is like so deeply connect to the highest Kabbalistic study of who God really is until you get so nullified in your own ego that you just merge with God. And anyone who's studied deep Chabad Hasidut knows what I'm talking about. I mean, it's like, you've done it, you ever studied it? It's something, I mean, it's addictive. It's really addictive like a drug. Of the cleaving, the commandment to cleave to God that you can achieve through going through the mind. But I can just tell you guys straight out that threes are going to be the most likely people to get involved in meditation and just nullify the mind completely and to just be, you forget all those studies, just nullify the mind, feel God pouring through your veins, feel your heart, feel God beating your heart. Your heart's a drum that God beats. Feel that, you know. Feel the earth move under your feet. I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling, tumbling. Anyway, I feel me lose control, right to my very soul. And you understand, threes are probably the ones who are going to fulfill the commandment of cleaving to God. They can cleave to God just with a good glass of wine and a nice steak, you know. They're feeling Hashem. They're threes, you know. They're threes, and they're right here in the creation, you know. So what's so interesting about it is we took 1/10 of humanity, and we've kind of recreated Judaism in its image, and left 9/10 of humanity disenfranchised. I mean, just like full of shame for nothing. They never, ever, ever, for 3,100 years, because now since Mount Sinai, it's been 3,336 years. So for the first 3,100 years, a 2 and a 3 were perfectly, you know, upstanding Jews. Whereas now, like, if you're a 2, you're schmoozing on the balcony when everyone's in there studying because you're too busy with all the people. Or you're schmoozing with your study partner because you just love being with him. Or you're just a 3 who's dying because you're not that interested in schmoozing with people, and you certainly don't want to have to be staring into a book. So, wouldn't it be cool if we could make a yeshiva that's for 1s, 2s, and 3s? There'd be one yeshiva. The study hall's where all the 1s are. The 2s stay in study, but there's not a lot of sfarim, not a lot of books. They have this much more loungy kind of, you know, like
Chumash Rashi?
yeah, and it's like couches, you know. It's not necessarily Chumash Rashi either, maybe not even inside the sfarim. The 1s come to be with them and to get them started, you know, because all you have to do is get them started. In fact, they would probably be the most likely people to solve the 1s. Maybe could be the 1s who are, you know, you get to an impasse, you know, you get stopped. So,
What sort of impasse?
it's like Plato's philosophical impasse, things they're not able to further distinguish the point.
Because they're not interpersonal?
Well, it needs hashing out, maybe with the interpersonal people. So what happens, they come and bring it to the 2s. The 2s then talk it out. By the way, there's nothing to do with brains, so the 2s could be actually smarter than the 1s. A 3 could be smarter than the 1s. We're not discussing IQ. So they bring it to the 2s, who are these high IQ guys, who are like schmooze it out and get through it. And then, what do you do with the 3s, though? I guess someone's got to make coffee and just kidding. Well, what do we do with the 3s? What do we do with the 3s? The 3s, the 3s, the 3s.
They're on Chaverim. They're on the roof.
Installing solar panels? Or maybe they're just off at sea like Zavulun?
Right. No, but we should have a place for the 3s in yeshiva. They're learning about women.
There can also be physical
Then what are the
exercise.
2s doing?
No, I'm saying, what would a yeshiva have for a 3?
Cooking for them.
A lot, like Lila Alman asked last us, like learning tzitzis and making tzitzis.
Oh, right. We put them in a giant workshop, like a big warehouse style
Delegating
workshop.
and learning
Where
how to
they-
sorting the.
Yeah, they're building the models of the temple. They're measuring and cutting and
Yeah, we've no one who can do all those measurements.
Right.
Absolutely no.
right, all the crafts. Oh my gosh, they have to learn the crafts of the temple times, because you know the temple's coming back to Temple Mount near you. So
The temple instance right over here.
yeah, we got the temple instinct.
And we've got the temple right over there.
That's what they do. They do that, and they and I imagine they can create charts, really cool charts on like forbidden unions and who was with who and who can't be with who, and who knows? I mean, they could probably create great charts on all that. But you ready for this? I'm gonna throw a bomb on all this, and then we're gonna end. Ready for the bomb? Whenever I meet a 3 who never studied in yeshiva, who's now in yeshiva, and he comes up to me going, I'm dying here, just dying, I'm like ready to kill somebody. So you know what I tell them? I tell the 3s, your job is to stay in yeshiva as long as you can. Your days are numbered here. So just, if you can just eke out 1 more week of Torah study, get it done. If you can do a month, oh, all the better. Yes, I know you're suffering. Yes, you're hating it. Yes, you're getting more and more angry at Judaism. But until you've gotten so resentful that you're going to throw the whole thing in the garbage, till you're going to throw it in the garbage, as long as you won't throw it in the garbage, but till you've gotten that resentful, keep studying. Why? Because if you don't study, you're not going to know what in the world to do, and you're going to have kids and a wife, and people who are like looking at you like, what do we do, Daddy? And you're not going to know. And at least stay one whole year in yeshiva. Because then you know the whole yearly cycle, what to do for the whole year. Like you've at least seen a year. So now you know what to do. Seeing a year, by the way, is you'll see, I know guys who only got to stay for like 8 months. They're excellent at 8 months of the year. And you can see them 20 years later, that for those 4 months, they're just in, ask the local Orthodox rabbi. What was the initials of that? There was ask your local
LOI.
LOI. Local
LOI.
Orthodox rabbi?
Yeah.
LOR. So you understand, like they don't have to ask anything of anybody for 8 months, 4 months, they every year have to ask because they just don't know what they're doing because they've never experienced it and they're already married with kids and they can't exactly go be at everyone's houses and see how do you do everything. So you owe it to yourself. If you can't do the whole year in one spat, so then do it in sections. Come for those 3 months, but don't come for the same 3 months. Come to another 3 months till you've done it all. Anyway, but I tell them your days are numbered. Stay as long as you can. If you're getting so resentful, you're going to throw the whole thing in the garbage. Leave. And there's one other thing. Oh no, that's the thing. And by the way, they don't just throw in the garbage. They'll just notice that things are starting to seep in. Like suddenly they find themselves loose clicking on the internet. Like, I didn't do that before. Like, where's that coming from? Like, I was a pretty good boy in yeshiva, and now all of a sudden I'm like loose clicking. That's the simon. That's the sign that the 3 has overstayed his welcome in yeshiva. So listen to this classic story. So one of these guys, I told him, like, listen, man, you're such a 3. And this guy's, he's in NFL ticket sales today. He's a wealthy guy. But at this point, he's just a boy. He's like, I don't know how old he was, 20, 21, 22. He's the cutest kid. So, total 3, nice 3s often are a little more chubby. They like food, they're although some 3s are exercise freaks. That's a very 3 thing. My 3 is my body shape. I have a very 3 body, and you hear my voice is like grounded, I'm embodied, my 3. So this guy was a total 3, but on the chubby side. And sports fanatic. I told him, listen, your days are numbered. But the guy ignores me. And 3 years later now, he's in full black hat, he's a yeshiva boy, and he's playing the whole yeshiva thing. And I'm just like, I'm basically too busy to stop this. Because all I want to do is throw him out of the yeshiva. I just want to throw him out because I knew he's going to go down hard if he doesn't get out of here quick. But again, I'm only seeing him in passing. He's no longer in my classes. He's like an upper level Talmud class. And he's a smart guy, a high IQ guy. So he's doing fine with the studies. Anyway, I hadn't seen him in a while because I only saw him as much as I saw him. But I was in and they separated the base Midrash building from the Essentials building, so I wasn't really in there that much, and I was really only coming in an hour a day. I didn't see him for a while. So, check this out. I'm driving back from my Rebbe's all-night class, and I'm bringing back all the Aish guys who would come with me. I had a 9-seater van, I would always fill it with all the Aish guys and get them to the class and then bring them back. So I'm driving them all back. As I'm doing that left up to Jaffa Gate, the ramp going up to Jaffa, as I'm doing that left, there he is, with some like ditzy drunk blonde, who's like not dressed appropriately at all. He's like, wearing a baseball cap for a kippah, and he's taking her to the old city, meaning he's got a spot for this, where this is going. And I imagine it was not the Aish dorm rooms, it wasn't going to be there, but it was going to be somewhere. And I see him, they're walking across, and I perfectly time it that my window would come right up to them. And roll down my window, and I'm not going to say his name, obviously. He's like, hey. So I'm like, hey, Yankee. The girl's like, Yankee. And he gave her his English name. And I'm like, hey, Yankee. And I'm like, who's your friend? He's really drunk. He has no idea what her name is. And he looks at her, he's like, I don't know. That kind of whispers to me. I'm like, what's your name, young lady? She, whatever her name was. Veronica or something, And I'm like, so how long you known each other? I'm just messing with him at this point. He's drunk. And anyway, he is like a ghost. He turns white. He I don't know what to do with himself. I come in Sunday. That's Thursday night's class. I come in Sunday to yeshiva. Pulls me aside. He says, "Can we speak?" And I said, "Yeah." So I speak to him, and he's telling me every excuse in the book. He's got a whole story around this, And I just took out a sheet of paper, took out a pen, and I wrote the first diploma in Aish Torah's history, a graduation diploma. And I wrote it as formally as I could. We at Aish Torah hereby graduate. Yankee, Ben, whomever, And at the end of the thing I wrote that if I ever see him in this base midrash again, I will remove him publicly in humiliation. This guy's been living here for 3 years. He's got all this stuff in the dorms. He's like, this has become his life. Like, he doesn't have another life at this point. And I hand him the diploma, and I say, you either walk out of here right now and go live a beautiful life and marry some awesome lady, and build a beautiful Torah home, or I'm going to start with the public thing this second. And he grabs a piece of paper and walks out, went to his dorm, took all his stuff out, and went to, like, I don't know where he went till he got a ticket to leave. I don't know, he went to Tel Aviv. He took off, and today has the most beautiful, I've spoken in this town. He helped pay for me to be the scholar in residence in the city he lives in, which I'll leave nameless. And I got to meet his wife and his kids. And he's a fully observant philanthropist to the Jewish world who caught himself as a 3, having overstayed his welcome in yeshiva. So the bomb is that 3 should spend as much time as yeshiva as they possibly can until they're ready to either blow up themselves or the yeshiva. And then they must get out and do their thing in the world, which is what the world was for. God didn't create the world for talking heads. He created the world so that there would be a dwelling place in this lower world that would relate back to him. Shalom, everyone.
Thank you. Sir?